So, first of all, let me thank you both for coming. I appreciate it. And I want to, I'm calling this because, as you know, when I took office, there were a number of concerns and concerns about how I did things, concerned about what was going on, and trying to get the community involved. As you know, I've tried to do some things, creating a community police task force, which I think has done some. You can go through, which has done some good things, and we're going to continue to meet. But I really want to make sure that there's a transparency with the community and the police, that everybody's aware of what's happening, why it's happening, and how we're trying to make it better. Better for the citizens, better for the police, in terms of working together, keeping the city safe, and providing services. So the reason I'm calling this is because I think we have started the process of enhancing that transparency. And I want to thank Chief Pratt and Captain Moriarty and the people that have worked on the website and the statisticians. We've handed out what is on the website. I encourage our citizens to go to the police website and you can get this report so you can have an idea of what's going on. You can ask questions. You can ask them to the chief. You can ask them to me. But we want to make sure that it's an open book, as much as an open book can be. And we want people to see what's happening and trust what's happening. We also have the goal of being able to compare statistics from one year to the next. Has something happened that we need to change to address different issues so that we can recognize that need and plan for it, and not just go on the basis that, well, this is what we've done, we're going to continue to do that. And I want to say that's not what the police department has done in terms of, they have made changes. This, I think, provides additional statistical evidence of those changes. I want to emphasize some things that citizens need to understand. Service calls. So in 2020, 41,965 service calls recorded by the police. That's an average of 3,500 a month. That's an average of 117 each day. That's an average of 40 each shift. So in an 8-hour shift, that's 5 every hour. That just shows you the volume of what they have to do. And I think it's important that the citizens understand how many calls they get. And I know citizens contact me about why does it take so long to get there? You know, we got different calls about different issues. Obviously, certain issues take priority. And I just ask the citizens to recognize how many calls they're answering and how we try to answer them. And the chief knows, and we've talked about, I want to make sure every call is handled in a professional, personal manner, recognizing that those constituents are the people we're serving. So I also asked, and again, you'll see it, and I know Dennis and Johan, you were at RACE with me, the Behavioral Health Network's assistance and the Opioid Task Force assistance. You got a 3-month report there, June, July, and August. I want people to recognize that's another case of the Holyoke Police not looking to arrest people, but looking to assist people. And it's important that we understand that. The Opioid Task Force in those 3 months had 226 personal contacts. Ideally, all of them we've been able to get into addiction services. But in that 3-month period, they got 33 people into detox referrals. 33 people accepted. We can't force them, but accepted the opportunity to go to detox. And we hope many of them are able to get off of their addiction, improve their quality of life. And this is a task force that's working to do that. They're not working to cause criminal arrest. They're looking to see people that have issues and try to give them the assistance. And I really wish I could get every one of them to say, yes, give me the assistance and let's do that. The Behavioral Health Network met with 151 individual encounters. Same kind of thing, offering counseling, sometimes just sitting around, having your coffee, getting to know somebody and making that connection, which could long-term make a difference. I know we're talking to people from the Uphill Task Force. They might talk to the same person 5, 6, 7 times before they get through. But I think it's important that we recognize that. The last thing I asked for was a breakdown of the department makeup. People have said the department needs to reflect more of the community. But if you look at where we are and where we were in 2011 and now in 2021, we have 10 less total officers. But in that same period, we now have 35 Hispanic officers as opposed to 24. We now have 17 female officers as opposed to 7. And that is with a reduction of the total officers from 123 down to 113. And there is a pie chart in there that I'm sure the chief's going to go over. And again, I want to thank the chief. I want to thank Captain Moriarty. We aren't hiding things. And if you noticed in the last couple of months when we have something goes on, we're getting it out there. I want people to know. I don't want people to be afraid of it, but I want people to be aware. And not only have we done that, but I would also say in a number of those cases, many times shooting incidents, we've also been able to make apprehensions, collect firearms, and a few other things to make the issue that was brought up be able to be handled and prosecuted and move forward. So I want to thank them for doing that. And I want to say, let the chief have to say. He told me it's his press conference, so I'm giving it. Chief, thank you very much. You're up.
I want to thank the mayor for calling this press conference and helping us to highlight the positivity that goes on every single day in the Holyoke Police Department and trying to get that word out to the public so they can understand exactly what their police department does every day. These statistics didn't come easy. When the mayor talks about statisticians, those are police officers that helped me pull this together. And we put this together relatively quickly to the best that we could, and we wanted to get it out to the public. When I took over August 1st, I immediately called together a group that I considered to help me in what we're calling our social media team. Because I felt that there's a vast majority of the public that, like myself, gets all their news from 22 and 40, the local news station. And then there's a huge portion of our population that also gets all their news from their cell phones, from social media. And I feel that we did a pretty good job over the years of getting information to the news medias, but maybe not so much out to social media. And we really need to tap into that whole other portion of the population that's where they get all their news. Otherwise, they'll never get our news. So I really wanted to make that a focus coming in. We've done that. Coincidentally, the mayor started a public relations committee, which is comprised of the public and the police. And one of the after their first meeting, one of the first things that came back to me was, we need more information out on social media, out to the public. So I guess I'd like to think I had some foresight there, and it was great, but it was great to get that feedback right away from his committee. And I think that committee embodies what community policing is all about, the police and the public working together to solve problems. And if those problems are within the Holyoke Police Department, we want to know about it and we want to solve them. We want to give a good product out to the public. Our stats here, we try to really make it user-friendly. And I had my social media team use me as their example because I'm probably not the greatest social media guy. So I said, if I can navigate it, then you know you've done it right. So they did that. I felt they did a great job helping me to highlight what I wanted to highlight, to get out to the public. What we could highlight, I think one of the misconceptions is that we just push a button over at the station and all these stats pop out. We don't have that technology yet, but we are working towards the future to be able to have real-time data on our website that people can tap into. So that's going forward, that's the hope. But we quickly put together calls for service, as the mayor talked about. And I want to emphasize, he broke that down very nicely. 117 calls a day. Understand, that breaks down to roughly 40 calls a shift, but that's an average. Some shifts, there might be 80 calls. And a lot of those calls aren't just one call, one car. A lot of those calls are one call, 4 or 5 cars, maybe all 6 cars. So that really puts into perspective how busy our officers are out there every day and everything we do. And then we did put in a section about our calls for service by ward. And I just want to point out that people that look at that, I think it jumped out at me. In 2020, we had a lot of calls in Ward 1. Well, due to the pandemic, what's in Ward 1 is the police station. And we all changed a little bit during COVID, and we had a lot of people coming to the station and doing reports there. So obviously, that's where that skew is. But if you look through most of it, everything else is pretty much right on. Our fiscal year stats speak for themselves. And I tried to break that down. I tried to use stats with some form of visual chart so people can really put it together, the type of offenses. I'm really proud of the chart about our intervention teams, as the mayor mentioned. That is a program that we've been doing here long before people were talking about people working with behavioral health network. We were already doing it. So as the national picture came into focus and said, oh, police should be with healthcare workers to do crisis intervention, the Holyoke Police Department was already doing it. I think what we have going down on Ray Street is a model for, I would say, the state or the whole country for that matter. And what they're doing is they're impacting people's lives, and they are helping people get the treatment and the help they need, not just going out and arresting people. And I think that's really, really important to focus on. And the work they're doing, I can't say enough about. And I'm so happy that we have that down there. And then the last slide about our personal breakdown. The mayor and I went over this at length. And I think it just shows that in the last 10 years, we have moved in a direction. And I think it's important to see that the diversity touches all diversity, not just race, but also gender. What you can really make out here is that 10 years ago, that big green area was 71% white males. It's down to 59%, so we're at 59-41. And what I would tell you is 10 years ago, I really believe we did make a conscious effort to move in that direction. This just didn't happen when Dave Pratt came into office on August 1st. I was here for it, but back in 2011, a lot of those officers in the green were seasoned officers who still had quite a ways to go in their careers. So it's not like they're just going to disappear overnight, and this would change overnight. But we put things in place back then through our hiring practices and policies, and we have made, I think, huge strides in that area to diversify our police department. And I can tell you 100% that in my entire career, it's never been this diverse. So I'm proud of that as well. And we're going to continue in that path. And I think we're at the point now where it just takes care of itself by our hiring practices. So we feel really good about the makeup of our department. And we have great officers here. I think the citizens in Holyoke should be proud of their police department. They do an unbelievable job. And I can tell you that our call volume here is as high as anywhere in the Commonwealth. And especially when you speak per capita and how many officers we have out there answering these calls.
How many are crisis calls? Like, we talked about the race street calls and all that, but
now that slide that we have about the the behavioral health network team,
yeah,
those crisis calls, those are just the calls that they handled personally.
So this is actually at the police headquarters, or dispatch.
What, the crisis calls?
Is that at dispatch? The ones you receive?
Yes.
Okay.
Those are all the calls that were logged. So, but the crisis calls that we have here, these are from the Ray Street office.
Okay.
We have an officer assigned with a BHN counselor every day. These are the calls, and we have a crisis intervention detail that runs from 4 to 8. So they're basically 8 to 8 every day. And those calls are the ones they handle. But our department is currently at 65% trained, and that is only because of COVID and retirements. And we are striving, we put more money in the training portion of our CIT grant this year to train our officers back up. Unfortunately, they don't get the training in the police academy yet. Maybe that's something that'll come down the road, but as of this day, that doesn't happen. We have to wait for them to come back from the police academy and then send them out to the CIT training. But we are prepared and ready to do that. I think at one point we were operating around 80-something%. I think you'll find that we'll always be somewhere between 80 to, obviously we shoot for 100, but it's almost impossible with retirements to always stay at 100. But I think if you're operating up in that 80% mark, that's pretty much 100% of the officers on the street that will be trained, because those other officers are usually young, new officers that are off to training. And then when we get the chance, we send them. So,
Are you seeing a mindset change with the next generation of police officers?
yeah, are we seeing what?
Are you seeing a change of mind with newer police officers in terms of crisis intervention and working close to the community compared to the old model, which was reactive and all that?
Yeah, I wouldn't just say it's the new officers. I'd say it's all the officers, because we're all getting trained and we're all adapting to the new times. And officers, one thing police officers are very good at is adapting and handling stuff that comes their way. And some of that is new change within policing itself. And I think to answer your question, new officers, sure, it's easier because that's all they know. The old officers have to change as well. But here at HPD, I don't see that as an issue at all. We don't have any old-time cops out there who aren't willing to be trained. They've all been trained. Because to my knowledge, most of the older officers are trained.
Chief, are there any type of calls that particularly strain the police department, that instead of calling 911, call the 7-digit number?
It's hard. I'm kind of more understanding of the person at home. What might seem trivial to us, to them at that moment, might seem like a 911 call. And I would not want to discourage them from using 911 just because maybe they should have called the main number. We can take care of that internally. As soon as they call, we can switch that over, and they won't be holding up a line or anything like that. There's a way for them to triage that very quickly when the call comes in.
Chief, what's the uptick to the motor vehicle stops attributed to? Is that because of well-imposed speed limits? Is it the bribery that popped in that sort of aided that effort? That I know some officers are dedicated to enforcement.
Well,
It's been a bit uptick.
I saw this. I see that there.
And we're still not.
I don't-
calendar year, right?
This is the fiscal year from 20 to 21,
Okay.
and we did not have.
I misread that.
Yeah. So that to me is, I can't say whether it's an uptick or not.
I know, I'm sorry, I misread it. It was actually, you haven't finished the calendar year.
Yes, which,
So it feel like you're on the same.
correct.
Okay.
So you're looking on the chart
Yeah,
that compares the 2 years.
Yeah, I looked at the wrong one, sorry.
I see what you're saying.
My
Right.
mistake.
I have a question,
One.
unless you're still answering.
No, I think
Dennis's
he
question.
answered his own question.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Are there specific things that we in the public can do to assist the police department in doing its job? I know you have that. Hey, if you see something, text us at this number or call us. Are you getting the kind of cooperation from the public that you need to do your jobs well and keep us all safe?
I would say that we can always use more. If something happens and we get one text, I wish we got 100 texts. So again, I'd hate to put a number on that to say, yes, we're doing this great or that great. Could we use more public support? 100%, but that's part of this whole plan, is to keep the public informed, let them know. I mean, the public is our eyes and ears out there. We know that. I think generally our public does a pretty good job, clearly, of calling in calls. We handle a lot of them. I think that, again, the public, the more they can give us, the public should never worry about it being too trivial. Well, someone else will call that in, this will happen. Because you just never know. Two people can look out the window and see the same thing two different ways. So I would rather get 2 calls than no calls. And sometimes people kind of talk themselves out of helping because they figure someone else is going to do it. I would encourage those people to call. Even if we say to them, yes, we have it, thank you. Chances are there's more information to get from that person, because everyone has a different perspective, and every little piece helps, and we'll take whatever we can get.
And then in terms of this report,
Yes.
is this something moving forward every year you're going to put on your website?
That's the plan. We hope to expand this. Like I said, with a capability to track the data a little more, even more user friendly, with a technology we're looking into. I don't want to speak too much of it yet, because I hate to promise that it's coming, because sometimes there's a cost, as the mayor knows, and sometimes that's not able to be done. So, and I understand that, but at the very least, yes, you would see a similar report next year, maybe enhancements as we go along. And we want to give out what we can. Like I said, we're not all push button. No, that's the problem.
Yeah, let me come in on that, because but let me come in on that because I think whoever is going to be the mayor, I mean, it is very important that we have as open a door as possible. We are as transparent as possible. And if we are not sharing information, if we are not sharing statistics, if we are not listening to concerns, that's a disservice. So, I mean, and when he was still a captain and we were meeting, talking about this, and I told him I want this as one of the priorities to get this on a website. I want people to see we're not hiding things. And I would strongly encourage whoever the next mayor is to assist the chief in making sure that this kind of information is provided, and maybe more information, as much information as possible, as comfortable as possible. As we both talked about, if I can get on there and he can get on there, we feel like most people can, because neither one of us, he's probably better than me.
Yes.
I'm certainly not a technician, you know. But, I mean, that's something that we've got to do. And I think if we do it, we improve that community relations. It deals with people saying, I trust them enough, I'm calling them to help me. Or I'm calling them because I can help them. And that's a combination. And as that trust builds, it's my opinion that you're going to get more of the citizens to say, let me assist the police instead of resist the police.
Yes, we discussed this a number of times in council hearings on
Yep.
this, in the city council chambers. That Elm and Appleton Street area is still a problem area. What's being done with that? That's a source of a lot of calls every day. So
Yep.
what's going on with that at this point? I know you've been bringing this up for some time.
Yeah, I've had some information that I'm hoping might improve the situation in terms of landlord-tenant, but I don't have that verified yet. But I think if that does happen, that will create a management team there that's more proactive, working with the police as opposed to ignoring those calls. And that is one. But if not, then I know they spend a lot of time going there. I know I've had people that have lived there that felt like they were a hostage and have had to move, and they wanted to be good citizens, but they just felt they could. So we've got to keep attacking it. And when we do, I'm going to sound like Mayor Sarno, but when we do this, we got to get the judicial system to say, you know what? They're basically holding these tenants hostages. That's a major crime. That's a crime against somebody. That's a crime that's harmful. And we need to make sure that they aren't just giving a slap on the wrist and a fine. You know, if you're going to do these things, if you're going to sell these drugs, if you're going to harass other tenants, you don't belong in our society.
I think one report during the hearing was from the landlords that some of the drug gangs that sort of inhabit that building were actually forcing the tenants to sleep on the floor, but they slept in the beds. I think there was some talk about
That was in another building?
Yeah,
And
around
that-
the same area.
We've made progress on that one. That's what we talked about. Yeah, it is the same area.
Yeah.
A couple of blocks down. We've made progress, and that seems to have been at least somewhat alleviated. I don't know if it's been totally eliminated, but it's certainly not as intense as it was 3 months ago. And we're keeping our eye on that. We just brought that up again at a meeting, I think 2 weeks ago. So all those things count. And again, we all have to work together. And the more the community buys in, and I will say, we talked about the 65% in terms of the extra training, in terms of crisis. And that was one of the things that was brought up at the community relations. That was one of the first things brought up. And we brought it up, and we're working to get that up to 85 as quickly as we can, having to live within all the parameters. Understand, when I appointed 10 police officers, 7 of those were Hispanic, 5 of them were women. So the next 10, there you go. I mean, that's an example. And they were very intelligent, qualified candidates wanting to serve the community by being a police officer. Those are traits that we want to have. And, I don't know if I'm going to get to appoint anyone else, but those are the kind of things that build a force that reflects the community, but also needs to have the community respect that force. And that's a balance. It can't be one way or the other. One other thing I would like him to talk about is the scale of calls in the summer and how that impacts overtime. So you would be
100%. Just before I hit on that, I will touch base on one part of the crisis intervention stuff that we're doing. And to speak generally about problem areas of gangs and drugs and things like that. The fact that we have these people out there doing what they're doing to help people that are addicted frees up my drug units to focus more primarily on drug dealers, gang members, gun-toting people. And that's very important to understand that years ago, and I was a narcotics officer, I would get a lot of calls about drug addicted people in parks and here or there. And literally, we handled that totally different back in those days. So now your drug unit that should be focused on drug dealers and gang members is out dealing with addicted people who really need services and help. So we've kind of figured that out in policing. And when I talk about adjusting as we move forward, we're doing that. But rest assured, those drug dealers and gang members, their day will come. And the Holyoke Police Department is very focused on that. And I want the citizens to know that. And I personally will make sure that those areas that need it will have those resources to help those people.
I was going to ask about that. To be clear, there's a very clear line for the police department between those who use drugs and those who deal drugs.
100%. No, there's believe me when I tell you, the police officers that want to focus on the drug dealers and gang members and the violence are doing that. They clearly know the difference and have for many years. But before, we didn't have those crisis intervention resources for the police. So the police were just forced to deal with that, which drew from their abilities to deal with the drug dealers and gang members. We are making huge progress there. So that it's just one point that I wanted to bring out. I will talk about what the mayor's talking about on our first, under our calls for service on our slide here. You could see those peaks and valleys, and those peaks that take place, the first page is alluding to is, the overtime money that we spend when we spend it, those peak times are, can cause us to spend more overtime money. And so there is a correlation between that. And we also, not to get too into detail, but we also know when is a good time to spend more proactive policing money, anticipating those peak air times. So That together is what can drive our overtime numbers sometimes. Clearly, homicides drive our overtime numbers, shootings, stabbings, things of those natures will bring out the overtime numbers. But I've been working with the mayor on that, the overtime numbers. He has been getting a report. We try to give it to him in a month at a time so he can see a bigger snapshot of it and see how it's affected. And he can tell you himself that he knows now why. And I think it's important that the public and the public officials understand that's why the overtime money is needed at different times in greater increments. It's not just a flat curve, this is how much it costs, because it fluctuates. And if you're in one of those areas that's getting shot up, I don't think you're thinking about how much overtime the police department's spending. You just want those police officers in your neighborhood making you feel safe. And we want to be there.
Just a quick question. Did COVID drive any of these numbers? I'm seeing one in March of 2020, in April of 2020, and then February of 2021. Did that have anything to do with it? Just to clarify.
Which page are you on?
The calls for service, just on the drops alone. Did that have anything to do with
calls for service
during those peaks?
In the wards? The ward?
Anywhere, yeah.
Well, as I spoke of Ward 1, because of the station being in Ward 1, policing in COVID times is different than any other time in the history of policing. And we did things a lot differently to try to keep our officers safe as well, because without our officers being healthy, we wouldn't have anyone to respond to the calls. And unfortunately, during COVID, the gang members didn't go to Zoom meetings. They kept out there on the street and doing what they do. So we had to stay out there on the street alongside them and do what we do. And so some numbers, yes, but again, 2021 is not complete. So some of these numbers will come more into line. But COVID was a strange year for policing. And I think that what you really will find in the very end is the police were out there doing what we always do. And those numbers will be pretty much the same. And there are some categories that I'm sure will be skewed because of COVID. We'll be analyzing that, I imagine, as we finish up 2021. And I think that is where we're at, though.
Again, what we're getting by doing all this, we're going to be able to get. All right, was that impacted by the pandemic, or is this a trend?
Correct.
And so the statistics and getting those comparisons and getting the trends all the way through is a tool they can use to say, we were having I'll just say, I'm going to say Ward 8, even though we don't have a Ward 8. In Ward 8, we were having no problems, and now we're having more problems. Why? Let's go see what's going on there. So those are the kind of things, it's just an analysis that is going to provide, all right, we need to put more attention on this ward, or we need to get the community more involved in this ward. And that could be a combination thereof. It may not just be we need more police. We need to get community helping the police so that they feel safer.
One thing we talk about a lot at work is we like to work smarter, not harder, because our work is hard. And the statistics can help us put the right people in the right places at the right time to try to curb the crime. And I think that, if you're not doing that, then you're sort of wasting resources. And the mayor knows, we just happened to find an old roster. We were at 103 patrolmen 20 years ago. Now we're at 90. So we have to do the same job with less people. So we have to learn to do it smarter and not harder, because we just don't have the resources. So we want to make sure that our officers are focused at the right times against the crime when it's happening, not sitting around for an extra 2 or 3 hours waiting for it to happen. If we can predict it a little better, we can do a better job.